Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 829 for the 25th of August, 2024. Richard Saunders with you from the Skeptic Zone studios here in Sydney, Australia. If I sound a little rough, if I sound a little ragged, it's because I've just stepped off a very long flight. But here I am, back again with the Skeptic Zone cats somewhere outside the door. Coming up on this week's show, Kate and Allie, the loons from Canada, folklore or future quiz. Join Kate this week as she challenges Allie with a quiz. Kate will uncover a mysterious array of treatments, and Allie will have to unravel the enigma of whether these practices hail from folklore of old or persist in the modern day. A bit of a fun way to start off this week's episode. And then we hear from our dear friend Susan Gerbic, who once again steps out, travels, visits, encourages. This week she has reports from SkeptiCamp in Seattle, Washington. Her interviews with organisers and attendees give us a flavour of the event. Susan's reports from local events encourage us all to be more proactive no matter where in the world we are. It's really important what Susan does because she encourages so many people, and you'll hear that in this series of interviews from SkeptiCamp. Then to round off the show, we go back to the Trove archives, and this week we're looking at psychic predictions from the 1980s. I love these old, silly predictions, plus a report from 1995 of a mind-body spirit festival, mind-body wallet. Now, bear in mind that when you hear the Trove segment this week, I did record it from a temporary studio, which happened to be a broom cupboard. So bear that in mind as the quality is somewhat, shall we say, different. Well, that's enough for me at the moment. It's time for me to run downstairs. I wonder if there's still some coffee left in the pot from a couple of weeks ago. I better have a look. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. It's the loons from Canada. Here's Kate and Allie.
Hey everyone, it's Kate and Allie back from Canada. And today we have an interesting show because I have no idea what's happening.
You're under my control.
So Kate, take it away.
Well, hello, Allie. Are you up for playing a game with me today?
And the listeners, I guess, can play along.
Absolutely, they can.
I can't wait. This is going to be fun, I hope. I'm probably going to look really foolish, though, and I'm all for it.
I'll just tell you a little bit about the game. I'm going to describe a treatment or remedy, and you get to guess whether it's folklore, meaning a treatment from the past, or future, meaning something that is done presently. Well, I could have just used past and present, but that seems so boring.
I like alliteration.
I know, that's why I was thinking of you when I made the game.
And Ben Radford, because he's into folklore and alliteration.
Well then, Ben, this is for you.
So right now it's folklore and future. So future is now, folklore is past.
Exactly.
Got it.
So put on your critical thinking tiara.
Got mine on. Mine's blue.
And let's get started. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Question 1. Using vinegar to fight infections. Is that folklore or the future?
I think folklore.
You're good. This started as folklore from France. During the 17th century plague, a gang of 4 thieves would rob corpses, yet never caught the plague themselves. Supposedly, anointing their bodies with a concoction of vinegar and herbs or herbs, this so-called vinaigrette de quatre valeurs,
Très bien.
four thieves vinegar, sorry for all of our French listeners, is still used today in the belief that it fights infection. I'd like to note that while vinegar does have some antimicrobial properties, and many of the ingredients steeped in the vinegar, including garlic, rosemary, sage, lavender, thyme, juniper berry, black pepper, they've shown to have some antibacterial properties, but I would not recommend using it as a disinfectant, as there's no evidence that vinegar can fight infections caused by viruses. So you were right. It is folklore from the plague days.
Even though it still somewhat is used today.
People still use folk medicine.
That's true.
All right. Ready for question 2? You getting the hang of this game now?
Getting the hang of it, yes.
Injecting blood into your face to ward off wrinkles and aging.
I think I know this one because I've seen some stuff online about it and some TikTok and YouTube videos. I believe that is a future.
That is a future, and it was covered at a SkeptiCamp you may have been at. This is known as the vampire facial.
Yes.
And it is done now. During a vampire facial, your provider, I won't call them medical people, your provider spreads platelet-rich plasma over your face, and then they use microneedling or tiny pricks in your skin that help your face absorb the plasma.
And it's to make you look younger, correct? And I think they use your own blood. Is that correct too?
They do. They take your own blood, and it's to try and reverse the signs of aging and to get rid of your wrinkles.
Wow. Do you know when it was developed?
It's within the last 25 years, but sooner than that. It could have been in the last decade, but.
So I'm going to look it up right now. What's it called again?
Vampire facial.
Vampire facial history. Apparently, according to Wikipedia, because I just looked it up, it has been available in the US since 2009.
16 years.
Yes. It doesn't say who came up with it.
Who came up with the cookiness? Nobody wants credit for that.
That was fun.
Question 3. Applying urine to the skin to cure or avoid acne.
Oh my. That's something that I could see being either folklore or future, especially with all those urine drinkers that are around. I'm going to say folklore.
You're right.
Woo!
Early American settlers had some pretty strange notions when it came to eradicating acne. One involved the application of urine to the outbreaks. Nowadays, people would never dream of splashing urine on their faces. As you alluded to, they just drink it. Urine therapy is a new wellness trend involving the practice of drinking urine for medical and spiritual benefits, such as curing allergies, treating acne, and preventing cancer. Yeah. But if you want it, put it on your face. That's folklore.
I think the folklore makes more sense.
Right? Put it on instead of ingesting it.
Yeah.
Even just collecting it for these purposes, just no. Just no. Just don't.
I just got the shivers. Oh, I mean, first we have blood on the face and now urine.
Well, I like to give a well-rounded experience.
Yes, you do.
But I'm not done with the grossness just yet.
Okay.
Question 4. Rich people using the blood of the young to harness perpetual youth. Is that from folklore or is that from the future?
That sounds very old-fashioned, but do you know old-fashioned is in? I'm going with folklore.
Well, you were on the right trend there because what is old is new again. Notorious Hungarian noblewoman Elizabeth Bathory was called the Bloody Countess. In the late 1500s, to stay young, she tortured and bathed in the blood of hundreds of young women.
Oh.
Nowadays, the super rich are infusing themselves with the blood of young people in an attempt to prevent themselves from aging. There's even a tech mogul who is spending millions to infuse himself regularly with his 17-year-old son's blood. So it's both, because before you were just bathing in it, but now you're infusing it.
It's both.
Depending on how you're using the blood, it's both. So you get a point either way.
You're so kind. So I'm 4 out of 4 then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 5.
Using a jade egg vaginally for sexual health. Is that folklore or future?
That is Gwyneth Paltrow.
You're right. That is from the future. Dr. Gunter and her colleague, Dr. Sarah Parcock, an archaeologist, investigated whether or not indeed vaginal insertion of a jade egg was an ancient Chinese practice. Their study of over 5,000 jade objects in 4 major Chinese art and archaeology databases found no vaginal eggs. There was no evidence that vaginal jade eggs were used for sexual health in ancient Chinese cultures. Their work was published in the Journal of Female Pelvic Medicine and Reconstructive Surgery this year. This is a new practice thanks to Goopy Gwyneth.
Wow, I had no idea that she was claiming an ancient Chinese heritage.
Yes.
So technically, I guess, because you were so generous with question number 4, I'm 5 out of 5. I wonder how the listeners are doing.
You're doing fantastic. Look at your critical thinking skills.
Speaking of critical thinking skills, I wonder if I just jinxed myself.
Let's roll the dice and find out. Oh, wait, this isn't the dice game. Oh, goodness. Are we ready for question 6?
I am ready for question 6.
All right. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but it's called oil pulling. Are you familiar?
I believe I have heard of that. Is that the thing that they do in the ears?
No. This is a practice that involves basically swishing vegetable-based oil, like a canola oil, and then spitting it out for your dental care.
I have never heard of that.
Is it folklore or is it from the future?
I have no idea. And if it was extra virgin olive oil, is it better for you? Well, I'm going to guess folklore.
Oh, you did jinx yourself.
So it is future.
It is future. Swishing vegetable-based oil such as coconut oil, olive oil, around in your mouth for 20 minutes and spitting it out.
20 minutes?
20 minutes. Good luck with that. Is something dreamt up in the last 10 years. Wellness influencers claim this would give you better mouth health, alleviate hangovers, and improve your acne, because everything improves your acne. Good luck swilling anything around your mouth for 20 minutes.
That does not sound like fun.
No, and I could see that being folklore because they didn't have things like great toothpaste back in the day.
That's what I was thinking. That was my thought process, was thinking, tooth care was really not something that was well understood until more recently. So I was thinking, that sounds like something they would do in the past. Interesting.
All right, now this one I love. I have a feeling everyone will get it right. Question 7.
Pressure's on.
Putting meat on a bruise. For example, putting a steak over a black eye.
Oh, I grew up knowing that one. So I would have to say that's got to be folklore.
Well, depending on your age, you may have grown up seeing this practice on TV and in movies, but we rarely see it today. The origins of this are hard to pinpoint, but it may just be a Hollywood creation of folklore.
Interesting.
100 years ago, meat was easier to obtain than ice, as freezers were not as commonplace as they are today, so it's thought that this may have led to people putting the cool meat on a bruise. But please never, ever, ever put raw meat on your skin, especially near your eyes. It's folklore.
But that's so interesting that it comes from movies, most likely.
Yes. There's nothing stipulated in any old books that say, like, these home remedies, this is what you should do. Probably because meat has always been expensive.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So maybe let's not waste it on a bruise, because
exactly
200 years ago, if you got a black eye, nobody cared. You weren't taking selfies back in the day where you had to look good.
And if I really think about it, growing up, I never actually saw anyone practice it ever.
Right.
It was just something I did see on TV or in movies. So interesting. Very interesting.
So question 8, using saffron as a mood enhancer.
Never heard that one. I've just used it in paella. So it's supposed to make you happier.
It's a mood enhancer, so yes.
It's a mood enhancer.
Enhancing your mood.
I'm going to say that's folklore.
You're right.
It just sounds like, something that has been around a while. I don't know why.
Well, you're right, because the Red Book of Hergest is a Welsh manuscript from around 1382 that contains some herbal remedies, including one to remove drunkenness that involves, quote, eating bruised saffron with spring water, end quote. And sadness could be cured by saffron too, at least in moderation, because, quote, if you would be at all times merry, eat saffron in meat or drink, and you will never be sad, but beware of eating over too much, lest ye should die of excessive joy, end quote.
That is a wonderful quote, I have to say.
Question 9, I'm just going to give you 2 words.
Oh.
Tobacco enemas.
And do you do that along with the coffee enemas?
Are you assuming this is from the future?
Yeah, well, if it was with coffee enemas, yes. So because tobacco products are more in disfavor, at least in North America, I'm going to guess folklore again.
You're right.
Ooh.
You've heard the saying, blowing smoke up your backside?
Oh, you're kidding
Well,
me.
in the 1870s, tobacco smoke enemas were considered a successful treatment for cholera and were recommended as an alternative to the remedy opium. The exact procedure varied, and in some instances, a pint of boiling tobacco-infused water was administered into the intestines. It was even reported that, quote, hundreds of lives might have been spared by the tobacco enema, end quote.
Now, listeners, if you could see my face right now, I usually giggle and I'm usually saying something. I was dumbfounded, gobsmacked. My jaw is laying on the floor right now, I have to say. All right, one last question. One more, huh?
Yeah, let's think of something a little more soothing. But question 10 will again just be 2 words for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
Milk infusions.
Milk infusions. Is that like into the bloodstream? You're not going to tell me. Okay. Oh. So we've had quite a few folklores here. So I'm going to say future just based on the numbers. I have no idea.
You think that I paid attention to numbers? You're the math teacher.
Mm-hmm.
This is total folklore.
Oh!
In the late 19th century, milk was believed to be the perfect substitute for blood. The fatty, oily qualities would become white blood cells. However, while a few instances of this procedure were successful, many resulted in death.
No, I'm not surprised.
In one instance, the injection of milk dropped the patient's pulse immediately to the point where they had to be resuscitated with a combination of morphine and whiskey. Only lived 10 days after the operation.
Wow. Well, that's not too bad. I got 8 out of 10. I'm actually very happy with that.
80%. Good job.
Yeah. Number 6 and number 10 wrong. How did the listeners do? I'd love to know.
While this has been incredibly fun, I would like to stress that regardless of whether these so-called treatments were folklore or from now, in the end, they are all fantasy and should be treated as fiction, since none have been proven to be effective.
And I also want to give a shout out to Frank at Scorn. I came up with the idea of doing something based on his talk at the New Mexico SkeptiCamp. It was so much fun and so disgusting. I sent his video to Kat and said, hey, do you want to do an episode about this? And Kat came up with the quiz idea. So it was really fun. So thank you, Kat, for that original idea. And thank you, Frank, for giving me many gory details to consider.
Thank you for playing along.
It was fun and great to see you again and great to hang out.
As always, lovely to be here with you, Allie.
Until next time, this is
Kate
and Allie, the two loons
from Canada.
Dr. Harriet Hall, MD, known to thousands as the Skepdoc, was a retired family physician and former Air Force flight surgeon who wrote about medicine, so-called complementary and alternative medicine, science, quackery, and critical thinking. Harriet produced a free online course of 10 video lectures on science-based medicine and alternative medicine. The videos and an accompanying course guide can be found by following the link at skepdoc.info or by visiting tinyurl.com/skepdoc series. Topics covered in the series are science-based medicine versus evidence-based medicine. What is CAM? Chiropractic, acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy and herbal medicine, energy medicine, miscellaneous alternatives, pitfalls in research, and science-based medicine in the media and politics. Harriet covers each topic in a matter-of-fact, no-nonsense way that is sure to educate and entertain. Find it at tinyurl.com/skepdoc series.
think we need to think. Here's Susan Gerbic.
Hello everyone, Susan Gerbic here. I have just finished attending the last SkeptiCamp of 2024 in the United States. It was in Seattle, Washington, August 16th through the 18th, 2024. Oh my gosh, I'm home now. I'm exhausted. It was so much fun. And I have a few interviews that I managed to do at the very last minute. And we were tired. We had been together from about 10 in the morning till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night when I was recording these interviews. There were so many great talks. It was just incredible. They knocked it out of the park. The weather was even great. A huge variety of talks. It was just really a lot of fun. So I'll let the interviews explain what the conference was like. And now I'm with Scott, who's the organizer of the SkeptiCamp today, or this weekend, I should say, because there's been events all weekend.
Well, my expectations is easy, just to have a lot of fun and learn some new things and meet some new people and get together the skeptic community to just have like a bonding event and experience, okay? And I also got a lot of help from Dan Green and Paul Disney and all the speakers. I'm just grateful that the quality of the talks was actually exceeded my expectations. So I'm delighted with it. And perhaps if everything falls the right way in this Tetris puzzle, it'll happen again next year. Yeah, I invite anyone to join us. If you just do a search for Seattle Skeptics, you'll find our website. And I suggest that you go to the meetup and do another Seattle Skeptics search if you're interested in coming to our meetings. We meet on the third Tuesday of almost every month. And we almost always have a speaker of some topic or another. And we got a variety of things. We talked about, UFOs. We talked about pseudoscience. We talked a little about homeopathy. We also had Shepard Siegel, who talked to us about tricksters in literature. And, we got, Craig Foster, who talked to us about, what are the goals that skeptics have and how can we make a difference. And we also had somebody, Jonathan Tweed, who talked about teaching evolution to kids. Just such a variety of topics. And I was afraid people would nod off and get bored, but I was watching the crowd. They were watching. They were listening.
Yes.
And we have a couple more talks tonight. One of them from the incomparable Susan Gerbic. And also we're going to get a talk from Amber Sherwood. She's going to talk about bats. And that'll be fun because bats are cool.
All right. Thank you so much.
You bet.
So I'm here at the end of SkeptiCamp. Well, at least the end of Saturday. All the talks are done. We had a fantastic talk by Amber Sherwood on bats. It was so interesting. Bats. And I did my talk, which I guess went okay. Nobody booed.
It was spectacular.
It was spectacular, he says, but that he's being polite. And this is Craig Foster, and I pulled him off to the side to give us a quick little interview. So, Craig, you did a wonderful job today. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for bringing your daughter. She's extraordinary.
No, the quality of the talks overall was just outstanding. I think what stood out is they were quite different. So like the Maury Island UFO story was really very local, which I liked because here we are, we're at Seattle SkeptiCamp. But it was really engaging in its sort of narrative about this UFO incident that was reported in Washington State history. They were just different, right? The evolution book in that series was really interesting. Bats was really interesting, and it was all good. I'd feel terrible picking one speaker out of the bunch.
Right.
Getting together in person, I think, is key. And it is easier to get on Zoom than to sometimes brave Seattle traffic and everything. but it's not the same. It is really essential to get together in person and see these people who are like-minded. And I remember being at a Bigfoot conference, and I was like, wow, I really get it. Like, you could see the Bigfooters letting their guard down because it was a place where they could really be comfortable with this thing they identified with. And obviously, skeptics aren't really inclined to be Bigfoot believers, but in our own way, it's the same thing. It's really nice to be around people who kind of share your approach to these issues in society. And in that respect, it's really rewarding to see everybody in person.
Right. And then because of a SkeptiCamp, the beauty of a SkeptiCamp is the topics are usually so different that you're almost always going to find something. You might go in saying, oh, I know a lot about homeopathy, but then there's always like 5 or 6 other topics that you really don't realize you don't know a lot about.
Yeah, and that very much was the case today. The UFO incident, I didn't know anything about. The bats talk was super cool. I learned a ton. It was really engaging. And Wikipedia, I knew about that work, but that's been updated, and that's of course really valuable. And it's incredibly educational. I knew my daughter would love it. She clearly has, so it's been awesome.
Yeah, great. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, my next victim here is
Dan Green.
And Dan Green has an unusual story to tell about the Skeptic Zone, because I pulled him aside to do this quick interview for the Skeptic Zone about the Seattle Skeptics that we're at. And he told me this story.
Well, I went to the, what is it called? Skeptics
in the pub.
Skeptics in the pub in Sydney on my one and only trip to Australia. Richard Saunders pulled me aside and said, hey, let me interview you. And I said, I don't have anything to say. But he asked me some questions, and, he got something out of it to put into that podcast.
I think that's pretty funny. Yeah. So tell me about the SkeptiCamp today. What stood out?
Oh, gosh, I liked Craig's presentation quite a bit about what are we after, what are our goals for skepticism, and how are we going to get there. That was my favorite, I think, of the day.
I mean, this is the first one you guys have done.
This is our first SkeptiCamp, so yeah, there were no surprises. It was all a surprise, or the same as no surprise. I mean, I was very pleased that we got as many people as we did. I was afraid nobody would show, but they did, and so maybe we'll do it again.
I think you will be doing it again. Okay, thank you so much.
And I found a nice quiet spot to pull aside one more person. Can you tell us who you are, and is this your first SkeptiCamp?
My name is Langley Foster, and this is my first SkeptiCamp.
Tell me what you thought. Was it what you expected?
It was a lot of fun. It wasn't exactly what I expected. That there was a lot more variety in the talks, but I thought it was a really good experience, and I learned a lot.
So tell me, what were some of the standouts?
I thought the most standout talk was probably the one about the trickster archetype within different contexts. I thought that was really interesting, and how that's present in a lot of pop culture, from, Native Americans to Bugs Bunny. So that was really interesting, and that wasn't really something I thought about a lot before, but I also really liked the talk about homeopathy, because I learned a lot from that too. Yeah, I guess those were probably the two standouts.
I'm really glad to hear you say that homeopathy was something you learned a lot about, because in the skeptic world, we are inundated with homeopathy. That's like, constantly we're always talking about homeopathy. We assume everybody knows what homeopathy is. But as you are a new attendee and a relatively on the young side, I would say that maybe this is something you didn't know about. And that's the beauty of SkeptiCamp, is we really don't know which audience we're appealing to or speaking to.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I'd sort of heard about it before, but not really the details and the principles. And so I just feel like I understand it a lot better now, and why it's completely debunked.
So Seattle SkeptiCamp was your first one. Can you see yourself attending these again in the future?
Definitely. I thought it was really interesting, and I would love to do it again.
Fantastic. everyone. This is Susan Gerbic from Psychics Explained. That's the YouTube channel where we discuss and analyze in great depth all those people who say that they can speak to the dead, all those readings, how they look like they're actually communicating with people. Why do people fall for this? There's a reason. It's much more complicated than you would think. Come to my channel, watch our videos. We would love to have you become part of our conversation. Just visit us on YouTube at Psychics Explained or Psychic Sex Plained on YouTube.
Now it's time once again to go back to those archives at Trove. At trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, who work all through the night, and all through the day, and all through the next night to digitise newspapers and have them freely available to the world. A wonderful service, and it's a wonderful thing for skeptical researchers because we can put in our search criteria and, well, see what appears. And one of my favourite things to check out every now and then, and I'm always amazed I find more, are psychic predictions. Yes, psychic predictions from many years ago. Well, let's turn to the pages of the Canberra Times dated the 29th of December, 1986, almost 40 years ago. And under the section called Summer Times, we have Psychics Fire Barrage for 1987 by Christopher Hansen in Washington. With 1987 at hand, leading United States psychics have fired a barrage of predictions for the coming year. Some are dire, some are happy, and some simply bizarre. Reporting psychic predictions has become a year-end tradition for the national weekly tabloid newspapers sold mainly in supermarkets, which keep Americans informed on space alien landings, vampire attacks, bedroom antics of movie stars, and other stories overlooked by the mainstream press. This year's tabloid forecasts are true to form. The National Globe Weekly quotes leading psychic Ms. Mary Dussener, predicting that 2 jumbo jets will collide over New York in 1987, causing reforms in air traffic control, and that the US and Israel commandos will team up next year for a, quote, brilliant rescue of US hostages in Lebanon, end quote. Mr. James Starr, another seer, tapped by the Globe, foresees West German medical team discovering, quote, a dramatic new arthritis cure involving simple injections, end quote. According to Mr. Starr, the ghost of actor Richard Burton will appear on stage during a New York production of Hamlet. And the talking image of Christ will mysteriously pop up on television during a broadcast of the Super Bowl football championship, asking the nations of the world to seek peace. And maybe he will give his predictions as to which team was going to win. Psychic Ms. Frances Cannon predicts that a, quote, hidden secret formula by Albert Einstein will be found and developed into a new defense weapon system, end quote. And her colleague, Ms. Lee Lusher, foresees archaeologists finding dinosaurs in a hidden South American jungle valley. Psychics quoted in the Examiner weekly newspaper, one of the Globe's arch rivals, predicts that in 1987, Iran's anti-US spiritual leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, will die and be replaced by pro-American leaders. Leftist governments in Cuba and Nicaragua will collapse after the death of Cuban leader Fidel Castro. New seed grains that produce huge harvests will be discovered and end famine in Africa and Asia. Dramatic cures for AIDS and other fatal diseases will also be developed. a US political messiah will emerge, win presidential nominations of both Democratic and Republican parties in 1988, and as president, usher in a new age of peace and prosperity. Weekly World News, a tabloid which often quotes obscure Eastern Bloc scientists, reported exclusively this month that East German researchers have developed a, quote, computer-driven robot, and, quote, soothsayer. According to the news, the robot has predicted that Moscow will establish a free market economy in the Soviet Union after the assassination of leader Mikhail Gorbachev in 1988. And I think Mikhail Gorbachev only died about a year ago. The paper says the robot has also forecast that the ruins of the lost continent of Atlantis will rise from the North Atlantic after a big earthquake. The moon will collide with a huge meteor and be reduced to half its present size, and, quote, a long-forgotten race of super-intelligent humans will descend from the mountains of Tibet, end quote, to aid mankind. Psychics quoted on Washington television station WRC predicted that President Ronald Reagan would resign because of the Iran arms scandal, Vice President George Bush would become president, and Castro would be ousted by 1987. The accuracy record of past year-end psychic predictions in the tabloids is not exactly dazzling. Soothsayers have predicted in recent years that within the year, actress Bo Derek would have a test tube baby, actress Elizabeth Taylor would marry Prince Rainier of Monaco, US scientists would develop a magic pill to cure cancer, and the Air Force would admit it had an alien spacecraft hidden in a desert hangar. None of these events came to pass. Now let's skip forward a few years to the Canberra Times again in 1988, this time on the 3rd of January. Washington, Saturday, Reuters. Wondrous events could be coming up in 1988. Discoveries of miracle cures, life in outer space, and the lost continent of Atlantis. On the other hand, according to American psychics, it will be a year of natural disasters, economic catastrophes, disease, pandemics, and misfortunes for the high and mighty. The forecasts appeared in mass circulation US tabloid weeklies, widely sold in supermarkets, which have made end-year predictions a tradition at least as entertaining to skeptics as to loyal readers. In the Weekly World News, psychic Countess Sophia Sabak said the US economy would collapse in 1988, a huge earthquake would devastate Southern California in February, and in March, quote, an oil-rich Middle Eastern state would declare war on Red China, end quote. National Enquirer psychic Jack Gillian also predicted a massive earthquake would strike Northern California in January, and that millions worldwide would suffer a mysterious skin disease with black blotches breaking out on their limbs. Enquirer soothsayer Mickey Dane said pop star Michael Jackson would have, quote, a vision of God while sleeping in his hyperbaric oxygen chamber, end quote. Sabak also predicted that in October, quote, an image of Michael Jackson will mysteriously appear in the ozone hole over the Antarctic. Astounded scientists will record the sight, end quote. Quote, incredible proof that other civilizations exist in space will be discovered around the middle of December. Look to Britain's Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher to make the announcement, end quote, Sabak wrote. She also said Britain's Princess Diana would get a divorce from Prince Charles, well, there you go, and start a new life as a fashion designer in Los Angeles. Scientists would discover the remains of Atlantis off the US East Coast, and a cancer vaccine for unborn children would be perfected. Psychic Jean Dixon wrote in Star Weekly, quote, brawls and fistfights in the Congress are likely next summer, end quote. Psychic Gillian forecasts, quote, one prominent politician will drop out of the presidential race after a magazine runs a picture of him dressed as a woman end quote. He named no one. The accuracy level of this sort of prediction has not been high. A cure for cancer forecast is perennial. Last year, the Globe tabloid said actor James Garner would, quote, face national ridicule when he reveals he was abducted by space aliens and flown around the universe for 3 months, end quote. As of December 31, Garner had not broached the subject. And to round off this week, a slightly different tacked on to the general theme of psychics. And we head to the year 1995, again in the Canberra Times, on the 4th of September. And this is to do with the mindbody wallet fairs, mindbody spirit fairs, New Age festivals. Psychic Affair, Seers Rub Auras with Skeptics, by Chris Ullman. Somehow the scene was eerily familiar. Albert Hall seethed with spiritual healers, clairvoyants, tarot card and palm readers, aura photographers, naturopaths, and a myriad of other old world prophets and New Age healers at yesterday's 16th annual Spiritual and Psychic Fair. They were not alone. Canberra's credulous and curious were out in droves. Last year, the fair pulled 2,000 people, despite a minor scheduling hiccup no one had foreseen, and the event clashing with Grand Final Day. And that would be the football. Alas, so thick was the lunchtime crush around psychics' card tables that it was impossible to break in to ask for a quick reading on a list of test questions being circulated by Canberra skeptics. Among some quite predictable questions in the skeptics' quote, prediction challenge, end quote, was the tantalizing, will Carmen Lawrence be forced to stand down? And she was a politician at the time. Alas, we shall just have to wait and see. Near the front of the door, the aura photographers were doing a brisk trade at $75 a snap, including readings. Customers sat on a chair and placed their hands on a machine called an orospectrophotometer, 6,000, while their pictures were taken. For their money, believers were given what looked like a badly exposed Polaroid, and then someone explained what these lurid swirls of colour about their heads meant. Unable to quiz the seers, there was nothing to do but browse the wares and services on sale at the stalls. A donation brought you a quick bit of spiritual healing. For a few dollars more, you could get what, to the untrained eye, looked like the same thing but lying down. There was an astonishing variety of crystals, potions, meditative CDs, and dolphin posters. The prize for Stop You in Your Tracks Impact went to a stall selling unicorn milk and mermaid essence. Unfortunately, the storeholder's answers to the obvious question was mundane. Quote, no, we do not have a unicorn tied up out the back, end quote, she said. Unicorn milk turns out to be a mixture of soothing oils. And no, mermaid essence is not what you get when you run a few of them through the blender. It's another concoction of oils with special properties. The storeholder, Laura Manning, is a full-time Sydney aromatherapist who sells products for a Queensland company, Dragon's Parlour. She said the names for the oils were designed to be interesting and to appeal to people's sense of fun. Quote, unicorn's milk sounds a lot more interesting than relaxation oil, end quote, she said. So it does. Alongside the aura photographers was a table manned by Harold W. Tizzi of Bermagui. He was flogging a range of self-published titles, including The Miracle Fungus, which he said had sold 90,000 copies in the past 14 months. According to one of Mr. Tizzi's flyers, the fungus in question, kombucha, can be, quote, brewed at home, end quote, and is apparently very good for you. Although the flyer says much of what's written about the fungus includes, quote, nonsense information, half-truths, or even dangerous statements, end quote. So, in case you were wondering, there is no proof that you can get pregnant, quote, without seeing a male, end quote, just by drinking kombucha. but you never know. So there you go, a little bit of a grab bag of psychic-related stuff, including the ever-popular predictions of what's to come. Predictions of what's to come. Can you predict something that's already happened? I don't know. And a bit of mind-body wallet thrown in. But as I like to say, and it's very true, when you go to Trove, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast this week. Now, coming up soon, here in Sydney at Skeptics in the Pub, Thursday the 5th of September, a special screening of the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See. They don't want you to see it, so come along to Skeptics in the Pub and see it. Now, this will be from 6 p.m. at the Occidental Hotel in Wynyard, and that's at 43 York Street. For more information, head to Meetup, look for Australian Skeptics, and I'm really looking forward to this. I've seen the movie a few times. Indeed, I was very lucky enough to see the development of this movie in various stages as Brian Dunning crafted the movie, and it really is worth seeing again and again. The UFO movie, They Don't Want You to See. Join us at Sydney Skeptics in the Pub. And an extra shout out to Susan Gerbic, because it wasn't that long ago that she and all of us lost our dear friend Mark Edward. And Mark and I, we got on very well. We had a lot in common. And one of my lasting memories of Mark is when I would visit Susan and Mark. Mark would pull out a relatively obscure movie which he particularly enjoyed, and I found that I particularly enjoyed as well. Lots of interesting movies, some dealing with the subject he knew very well, and that is how con men and women work, confidence tricksters. We would watch movies and Mark would explain to me what was going on, and I found that endlessly fascinating. The people we meet, and I was very lucky indeed to know Mark Edward. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. Let me see, this is episode 829. I know that the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe will very shortly have their 1000th episode. The Skeptoid podcast is in the 900s, and there are various other podcasts with high numbers. So, with your encouragement, I do have my eye on 1000 episodes, but, well, as we discovered in this week's episode, who can tell the future? But nevertheless, with people like you supporting the show, well, it looks like, shall we say, it's on the cards. So no matter where you are listening to this around the world, you might be in the United States, you might be in parts of Europe, the Netherlands. That's a nice country. I was there, I'm guessing 30 years ago. Had a wonderful time in the Netherlands. Really nice people. Really, the top people come from the Netherlands. Or you could call it Holland, I suppose. Although I think Holland is a part of the Netherlands. Or maybe you're in Australia, in one of the big cities like Melbourne or Sydney or Perth or Adelaide or Brisbane or Hobart. Or, what have I missed? Melbourne? Anyway, Canberra, or no matter where you are. Or maybe you're up there in wonderful Canada with those loons, Kate and Allie. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. But for this week, from Sydney, Australia, this is Richard Saunders signing off.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for episodes and show notes with links going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone on Facebook, X, TikTok and YouTube by clicking the links at our homepage, together with links to support the show financially via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are not necessarily those of the Skeptic Zone podcast or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello to those people who listen after the music for the dice game. It's back. I'm back in the studio with my dice contraption here. Bit of dust on it, haven't been using it for a little while. This is where I'm going to roll a 10-sided die. I'm going to roll it 3 times, probably 4, and you just use your psychic powers or dumb luck to guess, along with me, what numbers will appear. So I'm going to guess 4, 2, 6, and 9. Let's see how we go. First number coming up. Guess away. 5. One for Susan Gerbic. Next number. 10. Not doing so well so far here. Let's see. Now another one coming up. Looks like a 5 again. So the winning numbers this week are 5, 10, and 5. And the supplementary, the last number coming up, I haven't got any right so far. I predict 9 for this. We'll see. 7. Some you win, some you lose.